Hey guys, it's IT Ops Guy. I wanted to show you the universal device puller that's in Solarwinds. Now, I've got a project right now where I'm setting up some new PDUs within my environment. So I'm adding all of these individual pullers that I would like to get information about the PDUs. And the way that you do that is by grabbing all of the MIBs for a particular item and then defining what those are. So one of the things that I'm doing right now is these values right here. Now you can see I got this from the MIB. I went and did my SNMP walk and I pulled all of these values. And with these values, what I can do is now set up custom pullers. Now these three right here happen to be three different banks of volts AC in. And the way it is actually 206.3, 206.8, 204.7. But you can see how they come across from SNMP. They're coming as a complete string. And so what I need to do are a couple things. At first, I need to set up these pollers, but then I need to actually transform the results so they make sense. So what I'm going to do just for your benefit is I'm going to go ahead and say new device puller. Now I've already done the first one, so I'm going to go ahead and copy my MIB value for the second one. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy that, and we're going to paste it up here in the OID. And you might think to yourself, wait a minute, all those started with a period, and that's true. They did all start with a period. But you're going to omit the period. SolarWinds doesn't want it, and so we're going to go ahead and just throw it away. And the next thing we're going to do is give this a name. Now, I've already done, like I said, the first one, and so what I want to do is do this second one, and so I'm going to call it Liebert input volts bank 2 raw. And in this case, I'm just going to do the raw value, give it to me as text. I'm going to perform a get. Now, I want this information on a regular basis, so I'm going to say pull this every 10 minutes, and I want to keep the historical data. This is going to be an enabled puller, and I've already got a group that I want to organize this in. So I'm going to go ahead and say next. Now I want to assign it to a couple of nodes that I'm playing with. So we'll go ahead and do that, and we'll click test. Now, when we test these things, we should get that raw value back. Now, because these are in my environment, constantly getting power, it may not be 2068 like we expect, especially for this second one, but it might be something very similar. So you can see 2074 and still 2068. Again, I need to transform that. This is in volts AC. So we're going to divide this value to get the true and accurate picture. But for right now, let's go ahead and say that and then no. And so now I've got this, and I can see on my first one that I actually didn't give it a really good name. So let me go ahead and just change this. So we'll go volts bank 1 raw. And now because I've already got these two set up, I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate a puller, and I am going to change it to a number 3 back here. This number 3 is defined by the phase. So you can see we're looking at this last digit. There's a 1, there's a 2, there's a 3. And so I have this entire OID in there, and I just change that last value. So over here, we're going to change bank 2 to bank 3. Still going to do text, get, perfect. All this other stuff is great. Keep historical, yes, and enabled. I'm going to, again, assign it to my 2 test nodes. And we're going to say no right there. So now I've got these 3 things, but I still need to transform them. I'm getting values that match this, but what I actually need is a version of that that is smaller to make sense. So 2063. If I divide that by 10, that'll give me my 208 volts, what I'm looking for, along with a tenth of a point. So that is what we need to do, and in order to make that happen, we need to perform a transformation. So I'm going to come up here and say, well, I want to transform some results, and we're going to call this Liebert input volts bank 1 corrected. And I'm going to say I still want to keep historical. I still want it enabled. I'm going to put it in my Liebert group, and I'm going to set it for every 10 minutes. Now the question is, how are we going to actually transform this? So the first thing I need to do is add a polar, and I really wish I didn't have to sit here and click until I get to the L's, but unfortunately that's the way it is. And so now I've got Liebert input voltage bank 1 raw. You see bank 2, bank 3, and I named them all the same like that on purpose, and I'll show you why here in a minute. So I'm going to take that value, it's going to put it up here in a formula, and I'm just going to say divide that value by 10. And when I do that, if I go and I test against one of my nodes, what I should get is a value that makes sense. So I'm getting 2062, but my transform value is 206.2. That's really close to the 208 that I need. So we're not quite delivering 208 volts of AC power, but we are delivering 206.2, and that's okay. That makes sense. So let's go ahead and do that, and then what we're going to do is assign it to our two nodes that we're testing with. And now I do want this on a view, so I'm going to add it to both the chart and the gauge, and I'm just going to say finish. Now that I've got this transformation here, I need to do it 2 more times. Now I could go through the process of doing it just like I showed you, or we can come down here and say, well, let's duplicate that polar. Because I named it all the same, I can just change the 1 to a 2, no problem. Come back over here, and I can even take my formula and just change that to. Let's test it against a node, and let's see what comes back. And there we go, 2067, transforming it to 206.7. Good deal. We are going to assign it to our 2 test nodes. And again, I still want this on a view for me, so I'm going to put it right there. And now I need to do it one more time. So let's go one more time. Next, again, we're going to change a 2 to a 3. Everything else remains the same. I'm going to change my 2 to a 3. Again, I'm sure it's going to be fine, but I still like to test in between. And there we go, 2047, 204.7. Let's change it to the other node. Just give that a test, just so I can show you. There we go, 2072, 207.2. So that is what we needed to do, and that is a quick way to show you how to use the universal device polar in addition to transforming results, because sometimes you get these results from the MIB table and they just don't make sense. And so it is up to you, the person monitoring it, to ensure that everything makes sense to the user, the person looking at it. That's all I've got for you today, guys. If you got any more questions, throw them down in the comments. I'd love to answer them for you and show you a little bit more if you're interested.